Okay, and we are live on Facebook now too. Okay, so welcome to this webinar presentation on healthy, simple, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free cooking. For today, this is part of a series, in case you weren't aware. The last video that I did, I was talking about stir fries. Today, we're going to be talking about soups. The next one's going to be salads. The one after that will probably be desserts, but I haven't totally confirmed that for sure. And so the format of this is going to be as follows. So first of all, I will talk about some really basics of what it takes to be able to make some very basic soup recipes. Then I will give you some different variations, talk about some of my favorite recipes, that kind of thing. So different things to look out for if you are trying to be gluten-free, dairy-free, and sugar-free, common things that you may find at the grocery store when you go to buy and prepare soups and that contain gluten, dairy, and sugar. So I will have to point out, so the first thing that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of, and hopefully you can kind of see this. I'm going to hold this up for just a little bit. This is a crock pot that I bought, and this is fairly, I would say, small to medium size. It cooks enough for me as a single person to have about 3 meals. So if you're cooking for more than 3 people, you may need a larger crock pot, but I use a crock pot for all of my soups. So you can make soups just on the stove, but I find using a crock pot to be really helpful. I find it to be one of the quickest, easiest ways because you basically just set it and forget it all day long while you're working or whatever it is that you're doing. And so that's just the easiest, quickest way to do it. So I'm going to be showing you recipes that I'm assuming you're using a crock pot, or you could use a really large soup pan if you wanted to, but that would be a little bit different because it wouldn't be set it and forget it. And I do create pretty much all of my soups and things by scratch, so I don't buy canned soups, that kind of thing. So that's actually the first tip, because a lot of things like cream of chicken soup, cream of mushroom soup, those both have wheat flour in them, therefore they are not gluten-free. And even a lot of the gluten-free alternatives have sugar and dairy and other things added to them. So the first tip is that you want to, like I said, I really recommend using a crock pot and then making, just basically dump the ingredients in, keep it on low all day long. Could be, typically if it's only on low, you're going to have to allow at least 6 hours, but you can allow up to 12 usually, and do it that way. So I actually just realized I forgot the stuff all set up here. I'm gonna have to move forward for this stuff, be able to show you what I'm talking about. So the basic thing that forms the foundation of pretty much almost all of the crock pot soups that I do is what in cooking terms is referred to the French word a mirepoix, which consists, you can see this is a chopped up bag that I did earlier today that has some carrots, some celery, and some onion in it. So this is going to form one of the foundations of pretty much nearly all of your soups, except for there is one soup recipe I'm going to do that doesn't have this in it. And there's a couple variations and I use something a little bit different. But this is the basic foundation of a lot of your soups. So you're going to have that. And then the next thing that you're going to have is some kind of either chicken or vegetable broth. Now, broths, in a perfect world, you would make your own broth, but that, isn't always possible. So for chicken broth, the way you would do that is you would boil some chicken breasts or thick chicken thighs, and then or even just cook them in the crock pot all day long, and then add extra water above and beyond what you would want for a soup. And then you would have that extra broth that you could take out and save to make for soups. With vegetable broth, you could do things like save the odds and ends of carrots, celery, even asparagus ends if you chop those off, the tree trunk type things from broccoli, all that kind of stuff, and then put those with a bunch of water and cook them all day long in a crock pot, and then save that broth and use as a vegetable broth. So that would be the very natural, completely pure way to do things. That isn't always the way that I do things, and I know in a practical sense that isn't always the way that a lot of other people are able to do things either. So a couple of things that you can do. So you do want to read labels and be really careful about what you find in a lot of store-bought broths. These are some of the better ones I found. There's the Kroger brand, and then there's also a Great Value brand by Walmart, as well as a brand at Sam's Club, have a tendency to be the best. This is the chicken broth, and this particular one does not list sugar on the ingredients, but does say there's a trace amount of sugar. A lot of times that's typically because in the process of some of the cooking, the fermenting, that kind of thing, they add in a very small amount of sugar. So what I typically look for on a lot of these store-bought broths, and the same thing with the vegetable broth. Vegetable broth does say that, that there's a trace amount of sugar, is if it has less than 1 gram of sugar in the entire can, then typically I still consider that to be more or less sugar-free, just because that's kind of what you're going to find is the general standard when it comes to a lot of store-bought broths. The only exception you really do have here, and you see it's even labeled on here. So this is, even though it says it's the Sam's Choice, it is, I actually did get this at Walmart and not Sam's Club, but you probably could easily get it at Sam's Club as well, is the Sam's Choice bone broth reduced sodium chicken. And this one has less sodium, and this one literally does not have any sugar whatsoever. It's literally organic chicken broth, bone broth with some carrot juice concentrate, a little bit of salt and yeast extract. So it's super good and healthy. I really like this one. In this particular bone broth, you can make your own bone broth, but bone broth, if you try to make your actual own bone broth, it can actually really stink up your kitchen and your entire house. So, and it can be just really a lot of work, and more work than, my opinion, than what it's worth. So I find this bone broth to be a good one. You can also get like a beef kind. There's also a kind that's not reduced sodium. I believe when I bought this particular kind, I did not have the option of getting the regular kind. I think the store was sold out or something like that. But anyhow, the bone broth is going to be a little bit more expensive than just your regular chicken broth. However, it's a lot better for your gut and your digestive system and that kind of thing. So anyhow, so you want to have, like I said, just to repeat myself for the people that missed a little bit, you want to have this basic chopped up, and I have this chopper that I got that I can chop a lot of my vegetables with, that I actually got this at Walmart too, and it's basically just kind of how you can open up, you can easily chop and store a variety of vegetables. I can store my onions, my carrots, celery in there, all that kind of stuff. So it makes for a really good option, really good way to cut through your vegetables. So you put that, and you put that with some kind of broth, whether it's vegetable broth or chicken broth, and that forms the basis of a lot of your soups. So then the soup recipe that I did today that I ate for dinner, what I did is I just literally put the mixture of the carrot, onion, and celery. And in this particular case, I actually used one of these chicken broth cans, and then I added in a little bit of extra water, and I put in about a cup to a cup and a half of dry green peas. So they're just your typical dry green split pea that you can buy at the store in the bulk section, or you can just get them packaged. In this case, it was just a package that I had gotten at Walmart, I think. But pretty much all the grocery stores carry that pack. And then after about 6 hours or so, I just started stirring it. And then I went in and added a little bit of seasoning, because what you are going to want to do as well is it's going to be a little bit too bland if you don't add in some kind of seasoning. So a few of my favorite seasonings that I like to add, you could do just like a standard little bit of salt and pepper. You could also do something like a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of basil, thyme. You could put in even like a bay leaf if you want. You just have to kind of experiment. But there are a couple of different seasonings. This is one that you can get online. This particular one, it says beef on it, but it works really, really well in soups. And it's got different sea salt and spices, including garlic and onion. It's proprietary, so they don't tell you exactly everything that's in it, but it literally is just spices, doesn't have gluten, dairy, or sugar, of course, in it. So you've got that. There's also this other one that's a fish and veggie barbecue thing. It's got a variety of different seasonings. Or the other one that I find really good is this everything but the bagel seasoning from Trader Joe's. So you can just kind of experiment, but the main thing you're going to want is a little bit of salt and, 1 or 2 at least other kinds of spices like basil or fennel or thyme or some different things just to kind of season it to taste. I don't really have a specific amount. If I'm making like in that regular crock pot size that I showed you, I'd probably use around a total of around 1 to 2 tablespoons of spices. You want to be careful that you don't overdo it, but you also don't want to not have enough. So one way that you can potentially do that as well is to just serve yourself a bowl and then just take a little tiny pinch of the salt or the seasoning and put it in and stir it in and then just kind of taste it and say, okay, is that enough? That's not enough. I want to add a little more, that kind of thing. And the seasonings don't really have to come in until right before you're getting ready to start eating your soup. So there's that. Then the other variation you can also try is to add in some kind of bacon or ham. The tricky thing with that, and that's another thing, is that there's a lot of sugar in bacon or in ham. And so if you are going to do that, you need to definitely read your labels. There are definitely bacons and hams out there that do not have sugar, but a lot of them do. So you want to double check before you buy it, of course. And then the other thing is sometimes people like to have some cheese. This is my favorite dairy-free cheese here. So this is the Follow Your Heart cheese. I got this particular package at Walmart because that's where I get a lot of my food, but they do have this, I believe, at other grocery stores as well. This just tastes better. This is like their cheddar vegan slices that you can get. They also have, I believe, like a white version. They have like a dairy-free Parmesan. They have different stuff like that. So that's just my favorite brand, isn't necessarily the only one that's out there. They're become more and more vegan dairy-free type cheeses too. So you could add that in as an option if you want. And so then that's just how you make your basic split pea soup. And then another variation that can taste really good, and the only thing you do is instead of putting in the dry green peas, you can either put in some dry lentils, and you can use like the green lentils, or you can even use like the red lentils. And then you basically just make the recipe exactly the same way. So then you end up with a lentil soup instead of a pea soup. So that's a good variation you can do. The only thing that can also be really good for a variation is that the lentil soup, instead of using ham or bacon, if you want, you can even put a little bit of sliced chicken if you want to do it that way, and it tastes really good. Or you can also add in a can of these peat diced tomatoes. So this is another thing that you want to be really careful with. This in particular is a Great Value brand, and it literally says on it, in tomato juice. And the ingredients literally are tomatoes, tomato juice, sea salt, some calcium chloride, and citric acid for preservation, but there's literally zero sugar additives, nothing like that in it. So, well, I mean, actually the label says, so this is where label reading can be a little tricky. It says total sugar is 3 grams, includes 0 added sugar. They're saying that because there is some sugar in the actual tomato, like a natural sugar like you would have, because a lot of people don't realize that tomatoes are actually a fruit, just like an apple, a banana, that kind of thing. So you've got basically your fruit sugar in here, but you don't have, they didn't put actual sugar or corn syrup or anything in it. So that's another variation that you can do as well. And then the other kind of soups that you can make is you can make some kind of like a chili or different kind of bean soups. So with that, you would start again with your basic, your carrot, your onion, your celery. So here we are back to this baggie of chopped. You would start with that. You would add in either the vegetable or the chicken broth or the chicken bone broth. And then in this case, you can either use dry beans or you can use canned beans. The biggest difference is going to be if you use the dry beans, you are going to have to cook it longer. If you use the canned beans can be a really good trick for if you're like, oh shoot, all of a sudden I forgot I was supposed to cook dinner. It's already lunchtime and I need this soup for tonight and I forgot. You can use canned beans and that will speed up the cook time. And so there's some different ones, like this one, for example, is the Great Value black beans from Walmart. Prepared black beans, water, and salt is all that's in here. There is also this particular brand, just happened to be another one that I happen to have downstairs in my food storage. I'm not really sure where I got this brand from, but this is the Cento Cantonelli beans. They do also, Great Value does also have like white beans. Great Value also has red, like chili beans as well. And it's literally just the white beans, some water and salt. So So that's another thing you could do. You would put, so in with the chicken or vegetable broth and the vegetable melody, you would either just cook the black beans, or you would cook like some red chili beans, or you would cook some white beans. And of course, if you didn't add any meat, that would make it vegetarian. If you wanted to add in like some beef, you could do that, or hamburger, you could do that too. Personally, I don't eat beef or hamburger, so none of my recipes ever have that in it. But, or like I said, if you can find some sugar-free ham or bacon, that kind of thing, you could add that into any of those soups as a flavoring. So those would be some other variations to do that. If you're going to make like the chili with the red pinto beans, then you're probably going to also want to add in at least 1 can of tomatoes to make it, more like an actual chili type bean type soup. So you can do that. And with the chili, you might want to probably add a little bit of salt to season it with the chili and the red beans, but you probably won't add a lot of the other seasonings or whatever to it. With the black bean version and the white cannelli bean version, then you probably are going to want to add some additional seasonings. Otherwise, it's going to taste kind of a little bit bland, and you're going to need some of that to go with it. So those are all the different variations of that kind of soup. Then 2 other kinds of soups that I like to make is like a chicken soup. You can either do like a chicken and then soup and then add in some potatoes, or do like a chicken noodle soup. And if you do noodles and, of course, you're gluten-free, there's a couple of different options you have. So this package right here is, I should have saved the box, but I didn't. These are like some chickpea noodles. These have become really popular in recent years. There also are out there things like red lentil noodles, quinoa noodles, brown rice noodles, all that kind of thing. So any of your standard gluten-free noodles will work. You just would put those in into your crock pot with the chicken and the chicken broth, and of course your mix of your carrot, onion, and celery, and then season it right before you're getting ready to eat. And then the other option would be, if you didn't want to use noodles but still wanted something a little bit heartier, you could chop up. So you could take this chopper I just showed you before, and you could just chop up some chunks of potatoes, or even buy some canned potatoes that are already sliced. Great Value brand at Walmart does actually have those canned sliced potatoes as well. Ultimately, it's a little bit more expensive to buy just the canned potatoes than it is to just buy a big box or sack of the potatoes. You could even use red potatoes technically and dice up really finely a few of those and throw those into your chicken soup. So that would be how you would make like a gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free chicken soup. And then the other recipe that I really enjoy, and I didn't have all the ingredients to actually bring them, but you would combine like a can of this diced tomatoes with a can of the chicken broth, is what I found best. And then you would put it in there with like some chicken breast or chicken thigh. It could either be fresh or it could be frozen. Like if you had it in your freezer, just take it out and put it in your freezer. And then also put, like, I would use probably a bag of frozen vegetables, mixed vegetables. And typically the ones that I like that work the best are the bag that has carrots, cauliflower, and broccoli. I know the Great Value brand at Walmart has them. They also have the Kroger brand. Any of the Kroger stores will have them as well. So you can combine those frozen vegetables with the tomatoes, the chicken, and the chicken broth. And that makes a really good soup as well. With that particular one, you probably might want to season with a little bit of salt, but probably not a whole lot of other seasonings. So that is how you would do that recipe. And then another classic soup recipe that a lot of people will ask about would be like a broccoli type cheese soup. I know that's a really common one that a lot of people really like. So for that one, what you would do is, I find it easier to use frozen bags of chopped vegetables rather than trying to buy the fresh and then spend all the time prepping yourself and everything else. And it's really just as cheap. And if anything, sometimes these days it's even cheaper. And so you would just dump a bag of frozen broccoli into your crock pot with, in this case, you could use either the vegetable broth or the chicken broth or the bone broth. Really, any of those would work, but I would probably use the chicken broth personally. And then you would wait a little bit and just kind of let the broccoli melt, that kind of thing. So this particular recipe would probably be a little bit quicker. So you probably would have everything all cooked within an hour or two probably. And then what you would do is you could pour in, I would recommend probably using some almond milk. You could use coconut milk, but coconut milk, will give it like that coconut flavor, whereas almond milk, for whatever reason, doesn't have quite as much of like an almondy taste. So as far as dairy-free milks go, that's probably when I use a little bit of almond milk and then some of this, follow your heart, cheddar cheese towards the very end, and then just mix it up, and you can make kind of like a broccoli type soup. So anyhow, those are pretty much a lot of the soup recipes that I typically make on a regular basis. And so that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to stop the recording and we'll open it up and see if any of you have any questions.